thank you,
man.
for coming onto the podcast.
You said special guest. I don't know about special.
Of course.
The main bridge that got me into fashion was because there's so many different designers, there's so many talented people.
What do you feel like you've been able, or one of the most important lessons you feel like you've learned or will continue to learn that are ultimately put you in the position to really be successful?
The two main connections that I can make from fashion to health. The first one.
Do you think that a lot of the sort of mental health struggles that are there, a lot of it is coming from a place of Hey, my name is James Charpentier, and welcome to Less Than 3%, where we talk about healthcare, my journey becoming a physician, and really anything from the perspective of a black male pursuing medicine. And in this episode, I have a very special guest. He's a good friend. He is actually a recent graduate of the Fashion Institute of Technology with a bachelor's in footwear design. And so for this episode, I want to welcome Silas Lavino.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
But thank you,
man.
for coming onto the podcast.
You said special guest. I don't know about special.
Of course.
Keep it at guest. I don't know about special.
Just guess?
Yeah,
we'll find out in a few minutes. But so in this episode, I wanted to talk about something that I'm not sure how many people often constantly think about or are aware about. And I definitely thought this would be a topic that I wanted to have you on in the podcast with. But before we really get into that, the first thing I have to ask, if you would mind just really introducing yourself for the pod, just really let everyone know who you are, what you're about, give us a little introduction.
All right, what's up, gang? My name is Silas Lavino. I just graduated.
Congrats.
My major being footwear design, and throughout the past 4 years, basically studying all kinds of footwear from high heels, boots, sneakers, mix in a couple of handbags, mix in a little bit of jewelry. So basically any kind of accessories or what people would consider fashion, in quotes, minus clothing. So anything in the fashion realm other than clothing. But my main specialty or interest or passion would be in sneakers, athletic footwear for all different kinds of sports. Only sport I play is basketball, but I do have an interest in designing for other sports. So that's my level of expertise. Also in question marks because I'm only 21. Or also in quotation marks. But yeah.
Well, I think I would definitely say one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on this podcast today was because I know you're somebody that's pretty big, clearly, as we've already heard, when it comes to fashion, when it comes to, really all things fashion, and all things design. And so I definitely want to have you on. But to take things back a little bit for a second, what actually got you interested in fashion in the first place?
So from the earliest that I can remember, the main bridge that got me into fashion was like being introduced to the sport of basketball from a very young age by my uncles or older cousins. It was heavily pushed on me. I wasn't into it at all. Like when being younger, like growing up in Brooklyn, being a black man, like most of us are into basketball. I wasn't really into it in terms of playing the sport until like the end of middle school. So like 13, which is pretty late from starting to play a sport. But years prior to that, I got into the footwear and the basketball shoes that all of the different athletes would wear. I wouldn't really sit down to watch any of the games, but anything that I would see on TV or if I saw people playing at the park, I'd be like, oh, snap, what kind of shoes does he have? And I just got into it from there. So for years, I was into drawing shoes, sketching sneakers, seeing what other people was wearing, and I could care less about the sport from the age of like 6 up until like most of middle school. Once I hit 8th grade, that's when it kind of meshed together, my interest for footwear as well as an interest in actually playing the sport. But I'd say that was my introduction.
Wow. Okay, so that just sparked a couple of questions in my head right there. So first thing I really want to ask would be, you mentioned just all the history of it ultimately really starting from basketball and then getting to that level of shoes and going into fashion. This might be a 2-part question. So first part, what was probably your favorite basketball shoe? Maybe like your first. It could be like your first favorite, or just even up to today.
Okay, so the first basketball shoes that I can remember that I was super into. My mother got me a pair of Penny Hardaway shoes, the Penny ones, the Orlando colorway. So they're like black, white with the blue swoosh on
like
there.
a jersey.
Yeah, exactly. Basic same colors as the home jersey. And a lot of other people that are into shoes, into sneakers. I don't like the term sneakerhead. It's kind of corny, but I guess people could classify me as one. You go through the dilemma of, am I going to actually play basketball in these, or am I just going to like am I going to wear them, try to keep them fresh, like wear them outside? Or am I going to be a weirdo and just leave it in the box and never actually wear it just because you don't want to damage it at all? So I had that dilemma of deciding if I wanted to play them for the sport, because like I was on the intramural team, or like the school team briefly in elementary school. I didn't enjoy it. It was kind of just forced upon me, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. But that was probably the first basketball shoe that I got into.
Okay, and then this is the second part of that question, because that definitely continues to have me thinking. So the one thing that kind of surprised me was the fact that like basketball is like that introduction, but I guess maybe it might also not be too surprising. What would you say was probably your favorite like player / team, and did that like impact like the fashion aspect too?
Oh, absolutely. So most people that know me, they know my favorite player is Steph Curry. That's my guy. But like I said, I started watching and playing basketball like consistently at a very late age. I was in 8th grade, so that's like 2014 at the time. So literally less than 10 years ago. I haven't been like in the game or like in too deep for that long, but 2014 is when I started getting into basketball. My uncle showed me Steph Curry as a player.
Oh yeah, that's when.
And this is like,
yeah,
he had been an all-star before that, but this was like right before his first MVP year. My uncle was like, yo, Silas, you got to check out Steph Curry. Like, he's nice at ball. He looks like you. He can shoot lights out. He shoots threes. Nobody in the league shoots threes like him, da-da-da. And this is before the three-point revolution in the NBA. Now everybody's his play style has definitely influenced the rest of the league. So Curry being my favorite player and definitely influencing, I wouldn't necessarily call it fashion, because Curry and his signature shoe line with Under Armour isn't necessarily known as like fashion. It's a lot more performance based. Yeah. That's another conversation in terms of how how basketball footwear has evolved over time. We could get into that later. But I got my first pair of Currys. I still have them in 2014 or 2015. Wow. Yeah. Similar thing as like, for Penny Hardaway and his Orlando colorway. Curry being on the Golden State Warriors, their colors are the blue and the gold. So I had the home colorway for his first signature shoe with Under Armour. I've only had 3 or 4 pairs of Currys. I had a couple Curry 1s, couple pairs of Curry 2s, and then that's it. He's on like model 10 or 11 right now. They do like one every year, like most signature shoe athletes. After the first and the second one, I started to not like him that much at all. Oh, really? And like I try to be as unbiased as possible, even though he's my favorite player. Yeah. If the shoes are whack, the shoes are whack. They're good. They're good performance basketball shoes, but in terms of like the way that they look, style, they're not really it. So I like the Curry 1s. I like the Curry 2s. Haven't bought a pair of Currys since 2015. Wow. Yeah.
So you had them early. There's definitely a lot about Steph Curry. Definitely a lot about the background and how this thing got started. I think if I'm remembering correctly, the last part we left off really had to do with you kind of going towards like high school, I think, and like after sort of figuring out that was what you wanted to do. Well, what were the steps that kind of got you ultimately to where you are like now since then?
So once I started the first year that I played on the school team in middle school was 8th grade. I played JV sophomore year, and I played JV freshman year of high school. Sophomore year, I couldn't play on the team because I had a job at the same time, so I was trying to play on an AAU team outside of school, so the schedules would match. Didn't really work out. Came back junior year of high school, played varsity. My senior year, I was just trying to have fun, so I didn't play basketball at all the entire basketball season. But my interest in the sport as well as my interest in the shoes, they were really able to coincide once I was in high school. Because aside from being someone who's interested in designing and creating footwear, from a fashion perspective, if it's for a sport, you have to think about how it performs functionally for the athlete. So the more I'm able to play basketball, the more I'm able to understand the different needs that the athlete might have. So, for example, somebody like Shaquille O'Neal, he's going to be a very heavy player. He doesn't have, he's not as quick on his feet with his movement. So you tailor the shoe to be maybe a little bit more bulkier.
Yeah, like heavier.
A little bit more bulkier and heavier. The traction isn't, of course, for basketball, traction is one of the most important parts of the shoe, but that's not gonna be a focal point because it doesn't cater to his play style. You always want to cater to the play style of the athlete.
Of the player, right? That makes sense.
So for a shoe for Shaquille O'Neal would be a little bit bulkier. You want to maybe focus on like a high level of cushioning because he's a heavy dude. He's gonna be running a lot. Compare that to somebody like Kyrie Irving. He's a lot lighter. He's quick on his feet. If you watch Kyrie Irving play, a lot of the movements in his foot, the way he dribbles the ball, he plays with his foot very like adjacent to the floor, aside from with like the crossover movement. Yeah, so aside from his foot being flat on the ground, at the deepest point of his crossover, his foot is basically sideways on the floor, which most players don't do that at all. But he gets so low to the ground, he kind of looks like he's dancing, to be honest. So for a player like Kyrie Irving, since his shoe rises up and veers so far on either side, you want the traction of the outsole to go around. The traction is basically just the pattern or the grip on the bottom of the shoe. So for a player like him, he does a lot of choppy movements, very fast player, quick on his feet, and most of his game is ball handling and crossovers. So you want to focus on the traction, have that be a focal point. And since he's low to the ground, he doesn't jump that high. He doesn't do a whole lot of dunking. So he doesn't need crazy impact for protection from jumping super high in the air like LeBron James or somebody. So it'll be less focused on cushioning for the structure of the shoe and more focused on like a low to the ground feel. You can really feel wearing Kyrie's. You can really feel the floor under your foot as opposed to wearing LeBron shoes that have a high level of cushioning because he's a heavy player. There's a lot of jumping as well.
I'm thinking while we're still kind of on the topic of basketball, something actually came to mind. Did you ever see the Air movie?
Yeah, I was very critical of the movie. Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
It was a good movie. It's calm, but like this being something I'm super passionate about. Like, I know the history of Michael Jordan's basketball career as well as the history of his shoe endorsement with Nike. I know that entire thing like the back of my hand. What did you think of the movie though? Hearing like, was it the first time you were familiar with the history of?
But I think seeing all the, probably even all like the politics that were in like the fashion making industry, where you saw the different stuff between the different brands and ultimately like Nike really trying to sell on Jordan, knowing that like other brands got certain connections and things like that. It was really interesting to see that type of dynamic, and even to see like how Nike pretty much switched from being just like on one kind of brand to allowing like room for like basketball and then being able to get Michael Jordan and like flip the whole culture altogether. So I thought it was a pretty interesting story. You know, I thought it probably led me into the world of fashion to some extent.
You could see the way that the different brands market themselves to try to, you got to convince a young athlete to sign with them.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I think they did a solid job portraying it. I don't know if my expectations were just way too high just because I'm familiar with the history. Yeah. But it's so interesting because like Michael Jordan's entire life really seems like fiction. His entire career, like things just play out for him in such an amazing way when it comes to storytelling. It's like, nah, if you were to tell the story of Jordan's career with endorsements or his professional career, like 30, 40 years from now to people that never heard of him, they would think that it's fiction. Like, there's no way that's real. There's no way that happened.
Really?
Like, there's so many storybook moments that seem like it could have only been written that don't seem real. So that also plays into why Jordan has the most popular sneaker ever. Definitely the most popular signature line, but in general, the most popular sneaker ever.
Okay. So I guess especially with the fashion, like the knowledge of fashion that you'll be able to gain and everything and all the experiences, what do you think you noticed probably the most about like Michael Jordan's sort of like fictional story and his like development that really played into how he's built such like a great brand, you know?
I'll compare him to Kobe Bryant in terms of like Mamba mentality. So for Kobe Bryant, that's a big part of the branding. It's a big part of his personality, and they use that to market his product to sell his shoes. Example, somebody like Shaquille O'Neal. The marketing behind him as a personality, he's funny. He's probably the most hilarious basketball player that's ever lived. Even from his playing days to now. He had a signature shoe with Reebok for a little while. He was selling shoes with Payless.
Right.
But Shaq's huge thing is he's funny. He's hilarious. In interviews, he's always known to crack jokes with the media or just say something stupid, which leads him into a phenomenal post-basketball career of being on ESPN or Inside the NBA. Yeah. For Michael Jordan, the marketing is based around him as an athlete, really. It's not as much personality based, other than the fact that he's a relentless athlete. He's always in pursuit of greatness, and he'll stop at nothing to succeed. He's always been known for being extremely competitive to the point where he'll get into altercations with his teammates because if they don't see eye to eye on something, it's like Jordan's the head of the team. He's got to have his way. So when it comes to marketing the shoes, that's probably, other than his game being the main selling point, being the best basketball player in the league for 13 years in Chicago. That's the main driving point for selling the shoe. If you're a basketball player, you could have the greatest personality, but if your game is whack, you're not selling those shoes. But Tinker Hatfield, he's probably the most prolific sneaker designer of all time, because prior to Michael Jordan, it was a thing where different athletes were used or celebrity endorsements, or athletes to endorse different products like a tennis racket, shoes, clothing, whatever. But it was like, hey, I can just be the face of the company. Let me take a picture of you holding my product. And because you're well known, this shoe is going to sell because people know you as the athlete. With what Tinker Hatfield did, he developed a deep relationship and friendship with Michael Jordan, and learning so much about him as a person, he was able to infuse parts of Jordan's personality into every product. So if you were to show me a picture of every Jordan, I could tell you what each silhouette is based off of, and it has something to do with his personality. Whatever you're able to infuse into the product, you develop more of a connection with that person. I think the term is parasocial relationship. Have you heard that term? That's kind of a different thing, but it's not really a parasocial relationship, but a parasocial relationship is like when you know so much about somebody and they know nothing about you. It's like kids who are 10, 11, 12, and they have a favorite YouTuber. And that YouTuber or Twitch streamer is uploading content constantly. You know everything about them. You kind of feel like you have a relationship with that person, but they don't know nothing about you. Know you. That's not really the right term to use, but I just bring it up because it's like you know more about the athlete and you know more about the person that you're buying into.
So first, like, what are like the long-term goals that you have in terms of
long-term goals? I'd like to have my own athletic footwear company. And I want to design shoes for signature athletes. Or I want to design signature shoes for athletes. There's a lot of other goals sprinkled in there. I love designing clothes as well. But signature performance shoes or athletic inspired shoes is what I'm into. So whether that's at some point having my own company, working for another major athletic footwear company for a while, and then branching off to do my own thing, that's where I'd like to be in the future.
Okay, those are some big goals. I definitely love, being able to hear just stuff like that. And I think one thing that's really coming to mind in terms of all the goals you just mentioned, everything we've been talking about, is just with all the things to be able to pick up from, whether it's the movie we just talked about, whether it's your experience in terms of really getting into basketball and basketball shoes and clothing and stuff like that. How do you feel like what do you feel like you've been able, or one of the most important lessons you feel like you've learned, or maybe are continuing to learn, or will continue to learn, that are ultimately putting you in the position to really be successful in terms of those like goals that you have?
I think the most important thing that puts me in the position to be successful is networking, because a lot of fashion is, if you know somebody, then you're able to get in. There are so many talented designers on the planet. And if you don't have connections, you're never going to be in the position that you want to be or get the job that you want to get. You need to know people. And it could start from the bottom. You can go to school, make connections at school, or maybe you work retail at one store and then you meet a manager at the store who knows somebody corporate at the company who meets a designer or whatever. However somebody is able to network and build connections with different people, just being around other creatives and like-minded individuals, that's how you get to where you want to be. Because there's so many different designers, there's so many talented people. I almost want to say like it's not hard, because it's like fashion is subjective at the end of the day.
True.
Like I can't be like I'm a better designer than somebody else because my stuff looks better than his. I can say that all I want, but there could be a million other people who disagree with me because they like the other person's stuff better.
Yeah.
I can argue that there's a little bit of logic and there's a minimal amount, not minimal. There is a certain aspect of it that is like factually based in terms of design. Like there can be some science and psychological aspects to it, like people that study the science of color theory and knowing like what colors match with others and how the different responses that our brain will see two different colors, and it's like we don't know why that doesn't look good together, but it doesn't. That bothers us. Or you see two other colors and it's like that looks good. I like that. Somebody who understands how colors work, that's a fact. That's not something that you can argue against. But if I draw a picture of a shoe, for whatever reason, you could like it, you could not like it for some other reasons. People have different tastes based on different things. Some people love loud colors. Everybody in my family, they wear navy blue and black. That's it. Like anytime I'll show somebody my design, they'll be like, oh yeah, the design is nice. I'll never wear it in that color though. Like I just can't. Like if you got it in all black or like with a little bit of blue, like yeah. So it's subjective. I think it's more being in a creative field. It's more subjective than it is objective.
I know we've spoken quite a lot, just about like fashion, really pick your brain about different, ideas and opinions and stuff like that, and really just getting to hear a lot of your stories. So I definitely thank you for, sharing all of that.
Yeah, man. Making me feel like a celebrity.
So one of the very, very essential things of this podcast, I think you already know, is on Less Than 3%, we definitely really talk a lot about healthcare and healthcare related issues and all the different things that can connect to medicine and patient care and all different relationships that interconnect between people, which I think is something that's also shared with fashion as well. And one of the things I really wanted to have you on this podcast about was really to talk about even sort of bridging maybe even like the gap between like fashion and healthcare. Because I don't know how many people think about those two things together all the time. But I think just especially even through this episode, hearing your experience and all these different things and all these sort of things popping into my head about how there's even so much work that people have to do, even in their pursuit in the medical field, for instance, like myself as a medical student and so many other people throughout that training process and constantly being able to network and connect with people to get where ultimately you want to be able to care for patients. And
it's hard, isn't it? It's hard.
No, yeah, I think it's all hard. But I think honestly, one of the things I really want to have you on about was even just to talk about how fashion could be connecting to someone's health. I think one of the first things, just to lay out a simple example would maybe even be that I think maybe the biggest extent I would think, or maybe a lot of people would think of fashion and healthcare together, would maybe just be in terms of going to the gym, maybe wearing some gym clothes or putting on a scrub, to go to the hospital and stuff like that. But maybe I should actually even just stop there and ask you, like, what do you think, even in terms of like those sorts of concepts and a connection between like fashion or either pursuing, becoming a physician, being in the healthcare system, or just in terms of just physical health and fashion together?
The two main connections that I can make from fashion to health. The first one that is not as long of a topic because it's pretty simple and basic would just be like from fashion combined with health in the fitness area. So you think about the different kind of clothes that people will wear to the gym, wear to work out or whatever. It's not rocket science. It's nothing crazy. You know, just like wearing something that's light and comfortable. But when it comes to combining health with fashion,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm missing something, but I don't feel like there's a whole lot there, because it's like you just want to wear something that's comfortable. You want to wear something that isn't going to be like itchy or like chafing against your skin, whatever.
Yeah.
So just depending on the material your outfit is. But there is such a vast amount of research that's done, or not research. There's a vast amount of connections that you can make from fashion into mental health. So I've listened to a couple of your other episodes of the podcast, and I was like, oh, really? Now I could talk about this. I could talk about this joint for hours. Going to a fashion school, being around so many people that are interested in that, like these people eat, breathe, and sleep fashion. Like it is their livelihood. It's insane. I'm like, yo, if I went to another school, does it have that same vibe of like if I went to a performing arts school, are people just like, I want to act, I want to dance? Like, are people like really that obsessed with their craft? If so, that's cool to a certain extent. But I feel like fashion with that kind of art form and that form of expression, what I noticed, and this is just, I don't have no hard data, I don't have no numbers, but if you were to ask, so many people are depressed.
Really?
So many of them. There's so many different reasons for it. I'm not saying that being interested in fashion is the cause of it. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'll say is people who are in that place mentally, they'll specifically use consumerism, purchasing items of clothing all the time as a way to try to combat whatever you're going through mentally and emotionally.
Interesting.
So, and it becomes an addiction at a certain point. So you could be going through something mentally and you don't want to talk to a therapist. You might not want to get medication or seek help from other people about it. And your own coping mechanism is, let me just keep buying clothes because it makes me feel good for like 2 seconds. And while that feeling is there, I'm good. I'm not sad anymore for like 5 seconds. But once this piece of clothing gets old, that feeling and that depression comes back and it hits even harder than it was before. And just knowing people that are in different places with their mental health, I'll see the worse somebody is with their mental health, the more that they choose fashion as a form of expression. The more that they choose that as a coping mechanism as opposed to dealing with the problems that they have.
Do you think that a lot of the sort of mental health struggles that are there, a lot of it is coming from a place of almost like from a place of like the materialism, like the pursuit of maybe like wanting to be able to get all those things, or even like bringing that attention could be causing it, or even that, as you had kind of mentioned, that more so that you have people more so doing those things to really try to fill a gap that's kind of there, like almost in the sense of maybe a chicken or the egg sort of situation. Like, what do you think you've noticed has maybe been at the root of a lot of that?
There are so many different causes or factors to it. It could be you're buying all of these clothes because you want to fit in. You might feel a certain level of inadequacy. You don't have a whole lot of self-esteem or confidence. So it's like, if I buy these clothes, I'm going to fit in at school. It'll put me into the crowd of like people want the allure, or they want to be perceived as like a if I don't dress a certain way, they're not going to think of me as a fashion guy. You know, it's like I got to play the part of somebody who's into fashion. I can't do that by dressing bummy with like some sweatpants that don't fit properly or whatever. Like, and I can't be wearing a regular outfit like I'm going to high school or something. People dress like it's a runway every single day, or a certain amount of people. It's crazy. But in terms of the root, it could be you have a low sense of confidence. So it's like, okay, maybe these clothes will bring up my confidence. It could be, and this could be across the board for a lot of different universities. You're so stressed out when it comes to your school. This is my only outlet to feel better. You could be so stressed out with all of the different projects and assignments you have.
I think with all of those different things that seem to factor in when it comes to mental health, especially with your experience that you just shared, what would you say? Because I'm one of the main things that just kept going, I kept thinking in my head was the fact that you've kind of like gone through that entire pathway with a lot of those people throughout your time at the school to ultimately graduate. How would you say, especially being around an environment where you have so many people that seem to be depressed and be struggling with their mental health, how were ultimately you able to kind of find, or even just get through, or what was that journey like, you know?
Yo, I went to school through COVID, man. This one was insane. Coming from high school and then jumping right into FIT. I only had like a semester and a half before COVID shut the entire world down. So I had most of my second semester freshman year online, as well as my entire sophomore year online. That joint was absolutely terrible. It completely took away any motivation that I had for what I was studying. It was like, first of all, going to FIT for the first time, that was the first time I enjoyed school. I woke up and wanted to go to class and learn every single day. That didn't happen in high school. That didn't happen in middle school. I loved the middle school and high school that I went to. I loved it. But history is history. Math is math. And if I don't like it, I'm not liking it, whatever school I'm at. But going to FIT, I'm like, yo, I can focus on a specialization that I actually care about. I can wake up and take classes, go to school about something I want to learn, as opposed to sit in class and listen to stuff I don't care about. So I was enjoying it until they shut it down. Once everything went online, the transition of being a fashion student in person versus having to do everything online, the transition doesn't work. It's not a liberal arts major where you go from physical textbooks to PDFs on a computer. Everything goes from being in the studio, working with sewing machines, to having to do everything at home by yourself.
Oh, I see.
And the transition was terrible. I had to buy a sewing machine. I persevered. I pushed through it. It was tough. I hated like almost every second of it. It took away all the motivation I had for school. Didn't want to do it at all. But for a period of time, I will say, I went through a little depressed stage. Have no idea where it came from.
Interesting.
No idea. Like, nothing happened in my life that warranted me being sad, you know? Nobody in my family died. I wasn't poor. Nothing crazy happened where it was like, okay, you have a reason to like be upset or like not be in a good mood right now.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, I was just like, yeah, like I don't care no more. Like I'm just not feeling it. I'm just not feeling life. I think a lot of that has to do with being surrounded by a lot of those other people. Misery loves company. I think I'd consider myself like an outgoing, cheery person. I love meeting people. I love interacting with people. So I was quick to make different friends at school. Like when I became an RA, I was meeting so many different people at school, and it was great. I loved it. But knowing that the mental health struggles that these different people went through, I was like, dang, that's tough. But in my head, I'm like, that's you. That's not me. I'm not going through that. Like, I can pray for you. I can help you in any way you need assistance, but like, I can't really relate to you in that way, you know, because I'm not really going through those things.
Yeah.
Until I did. So I really think being surrounded by all of those people.
Yeah.
I've heard somebody say, I forget where it comes from, but you become an amalgamation of the 5 people that you spend the most time with.
Interesting.
You start spending time only with people that love to sing and people that love music, people play instruments, whatever. And these become your best friends, these 5 people. Give it a few months, give it a year. You're going to end up being just like that. Your interest for drawing might not completely go away, but you're eventually going to develop an interest and a passion for music because you surround yourself with so many people that are interested in those things. Me being surrounded by so many people going through those different mental health struggles, I really think a lot of that, like, there's a spiritual aspect behind it. Them not following Christ, they don't really have they definitely don't have the correct answer on how to get out a state like that. So they just kind of wallow in it. Some of that rubbed off on me because I had no reason to be in the state that I was. And it lasted, I don't know, a few months or whatever. When I got out of it, I was like, yo, life is good again. Like, we're cool. Yeah. Nothing drastically changed in my life.
Really?
But shoot, life is good again.
Yeah.
The sadness just went away after a certain point.
Yeah, just really quick. So I guess I probably want to ask you, like, what do you think was like the number one thing that got you, out of that? Like, what do you think was? Do you feel like there's a particular thing that allowed you to, like, kind of overcome that period?
It could have been other people praying for me, but I don't think I prayed that for myself. But there was nothing substantial that I did that brought me out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing that I could point to specifically.
One of the things that this definitely makes me think about a lot, and I feel like connects to even a lot of things we talk about in this podcast in terms of healthcare, is one of the things I remember bringing up. I think it was an episode from earlier this year. I think it was on physician burnout, probably, because one of the big things that again could probably relate a lot is that one thing we find. And even the healthcare field right now that people are really trying to figure out quite a bit is in terms of physicians burning out. Because, as you know, it's a long path. It's a tough path. There's medical. There's
20 years of school. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, you have medical school. You have residency. Some go and do fellowship to further their training after that. There's, a lot of it. And a lot of it is rigorous. It takes a lot mentally. It takes a lot even physically. And so one of the big problems that people are really trying to figure out is in terms of physician burnout. And one of the things I remember talking about in terms of that, and I think it also had to do with, I think I might have talked about a little bit on an episode we did about resident unions, where basically you have like unions forming of like medical residents in terms of just really trying to deal with a lot of the harsh conditions they feel like they're under that are kind of contributing even to worsening their mental health. And I think one of the things I talked about quite a bit, or I tend to try to talk about in episodes like those, has to do with really being able to overcome stuff like that and really having the practical tools that allow you to do so. And I think that kind of goes into the last question I even asked, just because one of the things I always try to do on the podcast a lot of times when we're talking about different issues is really seeing kind of like the practical side and being able to deal with those things. And so I know you've talked a lot about different factors that can contribute, to people's worsening in their mental health, especially in like the fashion world and the fashion industry, and also me sharing in terms of like the medical field. And what would you probably say, even from your own experiences, from maybe what you've seen others go through or come out of, things like that, what do you think are probably some of the main things that allow people to really be able to break out a lot of those situations when it comes to their mental health?
First and foremost, get off of social media. That joint will ruin your life.
I'm not on it.
That joint will ruin your life.
I remember.
I'm still on IG. I only use it for DMs. It's literally just a messaging app. I don't scroll through my feed. I don't go on no explore page.
Sounds like discipline.
I'm trying. It's hard. I'm trying, but literally it's only DMs. Social media is so detrimental to people's health. And I think the negatives massively outweigh the positives. There's some good about it, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk to somebody, you want to see how somebody's doing, call them.
Yeah.
You ain't got to check their story.
Yeah,
just call them.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people listen to sad music.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel it. Yeah, it really affects people. And what people do, they try to combat that by listening to more sad music. It's like, oh yeah, this relates to what I'm going through. It makes me feel better. Keeps
you in like a loophole.
Yeah.
So
if people were to cut out a lot of that music and social media, you would see a switch in your mood and your mental health fairly quickly, I would say.
Yeah. So you definitely say a lot of things, to be even cut out as well. That can help you a lot in terms of mental health. Is there anything you think of when it comes to like probably like adding in or, like in terms of whether it's daily habits and stuff like that you think can really help?
If somebody is not engaged in like a sport, a physical activity, they got to do that. Somebody that is already in an okay place mentally. Yeah. Just developing a kind of workout regimen or developing an interest in a sport, a physical hobby, adding that to your lifestyle, it massively helps. Yeah. It could be a regular hobby as well. Let's say all you do is go to school, come home, and then watch Netflix. Develop another hobby. Maybe you have an interest for learning an instrument. Maybe you have an interest. Maybe you like to read books. I don't know. Develop another hobby that isn't just like being sucked behind a screen. Yeah. Developing other things and crafts that you can get better at and see growth within yourself. Yeah. That stuff helps a lot. And most importantly, read your Bible. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I think so one of the things I do try to bring into the equation as well, at times on the podcast, is even in terms of faith, because I know definitely for myself, that has probably been, I think by far definitely the most beneficial thing in terms of me pushing through countless number of things throughout life, and even in terms of this medical journey. So I would definitely throw God in the mix for sure. And like the other things you mentioned, those are really like practical things that I think really help in terms of so many different areas. Because when it comes to the physician, I think the physician burnout episode and things like that, I brought in a couple of things that I think are practical that ultimately help to kind of build you up in terms of being able to deal with things in terms of mental health. Some of the other things, I've talked about maybe in terms of, I think, even just being aware of some of the biases that you have towards other people and things like that, and all these different issues I talk about. In terms of the podcast, I always feel like the practical things like faith and just being a good listener to other people and being aware of other people's emotions, just all those different things, I think are just so important, and I feel like faith is definitely something that ties a lot of those things in for sure. I mean, I think just in general, I think as you mentioned with all this stuff, seeing the things in your life that you might want to actually kind of remove or pull away from, or put a limit on and things like that. And then the things in your life that you want to ultimately be able to add are ultimately what allow you to, I think, be able to have definitely more balanced, a more productive, a more positive life for sure. And I think really with that, I definitely want to thank you, for this entire conversation, all your input, different things we're able to touch on. There's really been a great, conversation.
Yeah, man, this was dope. This was a lot of fun. Let me come back one time. Let me run it back. This is dope.
Hey,
this is super dope.
Maybe.
Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. Are there any last things you want to add?
I'm trying to think. Like, should I plug my social? But I'm not on social. No, hey,
anyone know where people can find you?
People can find me. I mean, like
the brand was.
No. I was selling clothes in high school, but I'm on hiatus right now. That website is literally shut down as of right now.
Okay.
You can find me on IG at SIYMAN. You could DM me because I ain't posting nothing. That's about it.
All right. So, I mean, I think with that pretty much wraps up this episode. Thanks again, for being on the podcast. I definitely hope everyone listening really enjoyed this episode. There were definitely a ton of things I think to take away from this. And so with that being said, definitely hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see what we talk about in the next one.